This is Marc Tobias with Eric Verheylewegen, the CEO at Gmpcs Satellite in Pompano Beach, Florida. And Gmpcs is one of the largest outlets in the country for satellite phones, data, communication services on a global basis, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And Gmpcs has been in business for how long?
As a group, we have been in business for 24 years. So Gmpcs is part of a group called the Network Innovations Group. And yes, in business for over 24 years.
And you represent a number of satellite communications providers.
Yes, indeed. So in terms of satellite phones, so MSS mobile satellite systems, we carry Inmarsat, Iridium, Verheylewegen, Globalstar, and also LightSquare. We also work with FSS, fixed satellite systems, and there we carry many different networks, Intelsat and so on and so on.
And what exact services, is your main business voice service or data service? What's your prime focus?
It's a bit of both. We do a lot of data. We have a large portion of our business as FSS, and FSS is data, mostly within voice over IP or voice circuits. But then we also have the other part of our business, which is handhelds, and that's a lot of voice. Handhelds are mostly voice, a little bit of data for emails.
Is there a big handheld market? You serve customers worldwide.
Correct, yes.
It's not just America.
It's not just America. We sell in many countries. We have distributors in over 35 countries. We have offices in 14 countries, I believe. So yes, we are absolutely global.
And 24-hour customer service.
Correct.
We've used your services probably for 20 years for the state of South Dakota, and so I'm personally familiar with your company, which is really why I'm talking to you today, as part of a series of articles on satellite communications. Is the handset market, satellite handset market, growing, pretty stable, gaining ground? Has it really taken off the way all the companies thought it would?
Well, if we look at how the companies thought that it would take off in the early 2000s, then no.
You mean with the Iridium debacle?
Exactly,
yeah.
The Iridium debacle, the Globalstar bankruptcy,
right.
and so on and so on. So compared to those unrealistic expectations, no. But when you come back to reality, yes, the handset market has been fantastic. I mean, you have over 350,000 Iridiums out there. Inmarsat, in their first 2 years of launching a handheld, have done more than 100,000 units. That's a lot. That's a lot of business, and it is growing. And actually, interestingly enough, Inmarsat has discovered a new market for handhelds, because we haven't seen our sales of Iridium slowing down, but we have seen our sales of Inmarsat handhelds taking off tremendously. So it's been very interesting.
To what sector?
A lot of it is emergency. So these phones are set, ready to go with corporations, with individuals, and these things are used as, for example, as we see with the last Hurricane Sandy. Terrestrial networks are very fragile.
Yes.
It doesn't take that much to knock down or to overwhelm the terrestrial network. At that point, a satellite phone is the only way for you to communicate with the rest of the country, with the rest of your crew, from phone to phone. So it is really an essential tool, and a lot of people have started to realize that. So a lot of it is for emergency. It can be for corporations, can be for individuals. Then it's for people traveling, to remote areas, or people that just want to know that, in case the cell phone system goes down or is overwhelmed because of natural disaster, terrorist attack, they are able to pick up the phone, pick up their sat phone, and be completely independent from the terrestrial infrastructure.
My Inmarsat, actually through your company, cost me about $600 a year for a prepaid SIM card that works anywhere in the world, now including North America. There was a restriction on prepay, some intellectual property issues that have been resolved as of, I believe, September.
Correct, yes.
So now anybody with an Inmarsat phone can use that phone anywhere.
That is correct, absolutely.
The interesting thing was that was true with Iridium forever. There was no restrictions.
Yes.
So is that the least expensive insurance policy, communications insurance policy, or is there even a less expensive way for consumers to have sat phone service?
No, I think that is probably the best combination. I mean, so Iridium, Inmarsat, two different products when you look at it, and we have clients who value each product. Each product has its advantages, and but I mean, yes, the ISAT-PRO has been extremely popular, and it is the least expensive unit right now.
Right.
You know, for
it's about half.
Yes, it's about half of Iridium. Yeah.
But there are some built-in that I'd like to talk to you about for a minute.
Sure.
There are, because of the network architecture of Iridium, which is a low Earth orbit system, about 500 miles up for the satellites zooming around, crisscrossing, versus the geostationary orbit 23,000 miles out sitting over the equator. So that builds in some technical physics issues in the network. Mainly blockage to the horizon and mountains. So if you're sitting in a canyon, if you have a user say, I'm mountain climbing, I'm rafting, whatever, they don't want an Inmarsat phone.
Right. It's as you suggest, it's all about your application. Where are you going to operate, and what are you intending to do? That will determine what is the best handheld for you. You know, are you evolving on a global basis? Are you going to the North Pole? If you're going to the North Pole, to the South Pole, only Iridium has service.
Yeah.
Because of, as you said, of the fact that they are geostationary, that they are low orbit satellites and have a polar orbit, as opposed to Inmarsat, which is geostationary. Now, at the same time, with Inmarsat, the satellite is in the same place in the sky, so as long as you have a clear view to that area, you can stay on the phone
forever,
and your call will not drop, because there is no in-the-sky switching. It's a very simple bend pipe. You connect to the satellite goes down to the ground station connects you to the PSTN. Done. So.
And what about, where's Globalstar in all this?
Well, Globalstar has had issues, as you know. So Globalstar is a multi-regional system, we would call it, because they were never truly global. The oceans were an issue, and so on. In the way that the satellite was designed, it's a medium to low orbit satellite system, but that relies on several ground stations, because unlike Iridium, the calls do not switch from one satellite to the other. So it is a more complex system, but that has some advantages too. Globalstar designed the best voice interface.
Yeah, it's great audio.
It's fantastic audio. Yeah. They are the only ones who use a 9.6 codec.
Yeah.
So you know, you get a very good voice quality, but not everywhere on the planet, because you need to have the right ground stations.
Yeah.
On top of that, as you know, they've had issues with their first generation of satellites and are now in the process of improving.
So wasn't Globalstar the constellation that forgot about radiation?
Well, you know,
didn't they have some satellites? Their transmitters burned up.
Yes, it all stems from the original business plans at the end of the 90s, where the people who designed and who are not here anymore, all of these handhelds went basically bankrupt, and then came out of the ashes. Iridium came out of the ashes, and so did Globalstar. So all of these satellites were not designed to stay in orbit that long. The fact is that now they have. And in the case of Globalstar, they've had to deal with solar radiations, which did damage some of their transmitters, and therefore making the system mostly simplex, one way, for many years. They are now recovering slowly from that.
But isn't it true, there's 48 satellites in the Globalstar constellation, but the reality is about half of those are limping because they're past their service life. So we used Globalstar a lot, and we switched to Iridium and now to Inmarsat because the reliability of the Globalstar network was no longer there. You couldn't get service sometimes.
Correct.
Is that still the problem?
Well, it's still the issue now. Globalstar has replaced close to half of their constellation, and they're still working on making other launches. So if you go on their website, you will still see that they have a calling tool. that tells you
what time to make a phone call.
Now, that doesn't work for a lot of people. For some, it does. Globalstar has an all-you-can-eat plan for the moment. And for some clients who are using it maybe to call their family if they are at sea, and every day they know that they'll get the satellite from this time to that time, and then they feel they call for pretty much for free.
It's cheap.
It's very cheap. So it fits. If it is an emergency system that you need to pick up and be sure to have a line, that's a different story, and there it would be better to look at other systems.
Yeah, I mean, the all-you-can-eat buffet is great until the buffet's out of food.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, so the customers that talk to you, for handheld satellite phones, what's the most popular criteria they ask you about?
Well, they want connectivity. They want voice connectivity, right? That's what they want. That's number one. And then data, emails comes second. But most of the time, it is voice connectivity. Ease of use is very important, obviously. But you know, most of the sat phones today are pretty easy to use. They want global phones most of the time. So you have regional phones like Verheylewegen, which, you know, it covers a region that goes from Europe to Asia and a good portion of Africa. So it's a very wide region, but a lot of clients prefer to have a global unit like an Iridium or an Inmarsat. So these are the main criteria, and they want it easy to use, and they want to get a voice line anywhere in the world.
Which is the most economical network for the consumer? Between Iridium, let's just talk about Iridium and Inmarsat, because at this point, personally, I don't consider Globalstar as a real player yet until they rebuild their constellation. It's not reliable. So that's my opinion, but...
Well, they're coming back. They definitely, they've suffered a lot through the last few years for the reason that we've explained. But you know, they are slowly coming back. But you know, I agree with you that right now you can't really compare the services.
No.
Because with both Iridium and Inmarsat, when you pull out the phone, you get 100% of the time.
I know I'm going to be able to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
That's correct. So
you know that you'll get it.
Which is the most economical, or are they about equivalent?
In terms of the airtime, Inmarsat and Iridiums are similar. It's a little cheaper on Inmarsat. In terms of the monthly fees, Iridium is a little bit more expensive. In terms of the telephones themselves, Iridium is a lot more expensive than Inmarsat. But they have different features. The new terminal from Iridium, the Extreme, has a panic button. Now on Inmarsat, you can also send your location and an alert by pressing 2 buttons. So different form factors.
Equivalent features.
Equivalent features to a certain point. Now the Extreme does have a full tracking. It's not just a panic button. You can actually track your phone, which is a lot more complicated on ISAT-PRO. It was just not designed that way. So it really depends, once again, what do you want. For most clients who just want to have the ability to place a phone call, a lot of people are going with ISAT-PRO, but as I said, our sales of Iridium have actually continued to grow, and people are very comfortable with the 9555, as for example, or really like the 9575, the Extreme. It's got a great feel to it. It's a very rugged unit. You can put it under a full spray of water and it will survive. So it depends how much people are ready to spend.
But and I've got both. The 9555, 9575, which is the Extreme, and the Inmarsat handsets, and I've used all of them. And to be honest, the new Extreme has had problems. Real handset problems and quality control problems, and personally, I don't like the antenna design. I don't think it's reliable. They break. They're fragile, especially compared to the Inmarsat. And I've always been pro Motorola, pro satellite, anything they build, but it's fragile.
Yeah, the antenna design has been an issue specifically with the recall. But I have to say, Iridium is standing by their product. They're spending a lot of money on this recall. They are paying for shipping. They are sending advanced replacement units. And there is, yes, every manufacturer in the world, and Iridium is a manufacturer in this sense, will experience issues at some point. A recall, some problems of quality control. And so Iridium has suffered that, yes, but they have also said, okay, we have an issue. First, they've communicated about it very early and very honestly, and then decided to take care of it, and take care of it by offering free shipping and sending advanced replacement units. We are still doing it right now, finishing the recall, and we've already replaced a lot of units from all over the world. This is going to cost a lot of money to Iridium, but they wanted to stick by the product.
Yeah, no, listen, and I don't mean to imply that they're anything but a top corporation. I've used Iridium for almost 15 years, and it's just that they have had issues, and for the consumer doesn't want issues.
Correct.
The consumer just wants a handset they can use, they can take out. They don't have to have any technical knowledge. They want it to be just like a cell phone. And now obviously the boot up time on Inmarsat's a lot longer than Iridium to log into the network, because on Inmarsat the network has to figure out where you're at.
Correct, yes, and that's something that we see with all new satellite systems. So Verheylewegen has the same, and so does Inmarsat. Is the way that especially with geostationary satellites, spot beams are the way that you can get the phones so much smaller. So you focus the power of the satellite in smaller spot beams. And if you're going to do that, you need to be able to manage how are you going to put the resources, the spectrum, how are you going to distribute that in these spot beams. And in order to properly manage your network, you need to know where the user is, so that you can, as a network operator, determine what is the best spot for that user, and how much power and how many resources, satellite resources in terms of spectrum and channels you're going to put in each of the spots. Therefore, you need a GPS. Fix. So yes, with Inmarsat, especially the very first time that you start your Inmarsat, you need to get a GPS fix, and that can take some time.
About 2 minutes.
About 2 minutes, yes. But once you have it, then it's fine. Then GPS fix actually is valid for 3 hours.
Yep.
And then it will renew, if your phone is still turned on and you're not on it, it will automatically renew the GPS fix every 3 hours without you having to do anything. So most of the time you just pick up the phone and start dialing.
That's correct.
But yes, from a cold start, it'll take you a couple of minutes.
So Eric, which handset is the most sophisticated in your view?
They all are.
Or is that a fair question?
I don't think that is a fair question. I think that all the systems are very sophisticated and will fit the right application. Which is why, once again, it's not like the ISAT came out and suddenly, even though Iridium is much more expensive, the sales slowed down. They didn't. They continued to pick up. And it's just that we have been selling a lot more handhelds. So yeah, the phones are both sophisticated and will fill a specific need.
So very briefly, because a lot of consumers, especially elderly consumers going on cruise ships, for example, are looking at sat phones as an alternative to $5 a minute cell calls.
Right.
Which this is all that, and that world's going to change. But presently, that is the world. So could you very briefly compare and contrast services available on handheld sat phones versus cellular? Obviously, because a lot of consumers don't understand, for example, you can't use sat phones reliably indoors. Right. They're not designed for that. Past the coverage issue, of course, the flip side of that is you can use a sat phone anywhere outside, but you can't use a terrestrial-based cell phone anywhere. There has to be local towers.
Right.
Other than that, are the two services pretty comparable as far as SMS messages, as far as email, as far as voice, the quality? Obviously the bandwidth is a lot lower on sat phones. But are the services today pretty comparable?
They are to a certain point. Sat phones will never. I get this question all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. That's why I'm asking.
I'm in satellite communication, and they go, "Oh, well, so these sat phones, they're going to replace all of these things." And pull out, like I have my iPhone and say, "Oh yeah, these sat phones are going to replace all of these one day." Yeah. And the truth is, no, absolutely not.
No, they can't.
They can't. And cell phones continue to evolve, and sat phones continue to evolve. But in the end, the sat phone is for when cell phones either stop working because of the towers are not functioning because of lack of electricity or natural disaster, or because there are no towers in that area, and because there will never be towers because it's simply not economical to put a tower in the middle of the desert, or a floating tower in the middle of the ocean. So there's always going to be a place for sat phones, and the more people have cell phones, the more they will have the need to be connected, and therefore will want a sat phone when they know that they're going out of that coverage, which is great for us because otherwise we'd be out of business pretty quickly. But because the sat phones always stay 2 to 4 years ahead of the cell phones.
Right.
And every time that somebody puts a cell phone tower, you could say, well, that means that your satellite business is taking a hit and you'll have less clients. Yes and no. In that area, maybe. But these clients will want to communicate everywhere. People cannot not be able to communicate today. That's why we sell so many sat phones. So sat phones are not going to replace cell phones. However, you know, are they similar? Well, in terms of voice and SMS, absolutely. You can't really tell the difference. In terms of data, well, it depends. There is no satellite BlackBerry or satellite iPhone from the email point of view yet. But there are some Wi-Fi hotspots that exist or are being developed to be able to do low-speed email. The throughput, as you mentioned, on handhelds is very small, so it's still marginal for data. But for SMS and voice, it's the same type of quality. As a matter of fact, you know, traveling even sometimes through Europe with my cell phone, I get more drop calls on my cell phone traveling through Europe than I get with my sat phone, you know, in the middle of Africa. So yes, they are quite similar. But one thing that you touched on that is absolutely crucial is for people using these phones, as for example on cruise ships, is that you do need to have a clear view of the sky. You cannot operate from indoors. In some scenarios, you can put your ISAT phone, as for example, by the window.
I've done it.
And we have actually a little Bluetooth system that we use for that. So if you're like me and you like to pace around when you're on the phone, you put your ISAT-PRO through the window, make sure that the window doesn't have metal in it, otherwise it will interfere.
Like copper glass.
Exactly, but if it doesn't, and you get a clear signal, and the ship is not moving, or you are in an area, or even through a tent if you're in Africa or something like that, then you can use that little Bluetooth and just have the Bluetooth with you and walk around as if you were using your regular cell phone. So that's kind of the hybrid between the two. Now in terms of cost, if you're like me and you've used a cell phone around the world, my roaming charges, and my cell phone provider loves me for that, will go from $1 a minute in Europe to $6 a minute in Russia,
in China, Russia,
and everything. I mean, in the Caribbean, $2, $2.50, $3 here, $3 there. With a sat phone, at least if you pay, let's say, $1.50 per minute, or even less if you are a heavier user, you know how much you're paying.
That's correct.
And you know that from the start. With your cell phone providers, most of them, you have no idea. You are roaming on someone, and then you receive the bill, and here is a $5,000 or $6,000 bill as you come back from your trip to Asia, to Africa, and that gets pretty shocking.
Well, I've written about this a lot, and of course my answer is local SIM cards to start with, but I'm in the same 10 countries all the time.
Right.
And so I keep local SIM cards, which is by far the best deal anywhere for anything. So let me just sum this up. What's the biggest problem that your customers complain to you about sat phone service? The biggest technical problem they have that maybe comes from lack of understanding.
Yes, so interestingly enough, one of the highest problem is dialing. It sounds silly, but most satellite phones, you need to dial 00 and then the country code, which is something that globally is
pretty standard.
It's pretty standard. In North America, it isn't 011, and so obviously we have cheat sheets, and we make sure to let people know here is a quick start. Make sure that you dial like this. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much in bold you put it. People don't necessarily read it. So, but that's something that gets corrected very easily because we see online the call records immediately. So if somebody calls us and goes, I was trying my sat phone.
Yeah, you can bring up the number they dialed.
We look at the number you dial. We can say, well, you dial 011. That's why. Sometimes they go like, wow, how do you know? It's like, well, We do. We monitor the network. That's part of our service, and we can therefore help them right away. The other part is to ensure that they have a clear view of the sky. So in terms of Inmarsat, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you need to have a clear view of the southern skies, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, a clear view of the northern skies. And then, a satellite will be to your southwest or to your southeast or northwest or northeast, but still, if you're pointing that general direction, you will start to get a signal, and just by moving around, your signal will go up to the right level, and you'll be ready to.
Well, actually, the Inmarsat handset will show you.
Yes, it will
the
tell
signal
you
level if you orient the antenna properly.
Exactly, and if you don't, it will tell you to move a quarter turn, and
yes.
You will catch the satellite at that point. Same thing with Iridium. Iridium will clearly show
right.
you the signal strength. No, you don't really need to know where the satellites are, because chances are they're right above you.
Yeah.
And they have a polar orbit north to south. So if you're in an area where you don't have a full view of the sky with an Iridium, you may lose one of the satellites before the next one comes in. So that's just something that we tell people, look, you need in general to be in an open area, and then you will be fine. You won't get a drop call, or you won't lose the satellite.
But this brings up one other question before I close this, and that is on GSM networks, the default for everybody that doesn't understand international dialing access codes is to hold the 0 key down, which brings up the plus key, yes. which defaults the dialing code for wherever you are. I believe my Inmarsat will do the same thing.
Yes, they have made that change to do it as well. On the Iridium, to be honest, I would have to check. I've been so used to just do 0.
I honestly recall whether I can hold the 0 key down on my Iridium phone and it'll default to 00 plus. And what about, because I just ran into this very interestingly with Verizon over in Greece. On CDMA is not designed for that default function, but it still works. And notwithstanding, when I talked to Verizon Tech, they said, no. It's first of all, on CDMA networks, it's a different international dialing access code. But finally, I pushed the 0 key, coming up with a plus key, and it did default to the dialing code, which evidently is non-standard, which I had, I guess, forgotten about. And so you monitor the network so you can help your customers 24 hours
Absolutely.
a day.
We can tell exactly what they dial, and we can help them immediately. And that's really what it comes down to. Our customers who have sat phones buy these for lifelines. Yeah. So we need to be there 24 hours a day to help them. If your lifeline doesn't work, what is the point? So it is very important for us to be there, and that's what we do. Okay,
so last question. Who should buy a satellite phone?
Well, not just the people who are traveling to Africa or to remote places. Sure, all of these people, whether they are tourists, they are in the mining industry, they are geologists, they are, we sell to NGOs, we sell to government, we sell to the maritime industry, the fishermen, the yachts, and so on and so on. So we cover all of these verticals. So all of these clients, and the media as well. We are the leading provider of the media. All of the major media in the US and several of the major ones in the UK go through us. So all of these clients, of course, they need sat phones, they buy them. However, other people also need sat phones, and they don't necessarily know that they need it until the cell phone stops working.
They need it, yeah.
But we have been talking to a lot of people, and we see this is, people are starting to think, and every time, unfortunately, it takes sometimes a hurricane or a natural disaster to remind people how vulnerable the terrestrial infrastructure can be, and how important it is for them as a recovery plan or survival plan to be able to communicate.
To recap, who should buy a satellite phone? Basically, a lot of folks now, especially since the latest hurricane on the East Coast, are rethinking that maybe a satellite phone isn't for those that go into the jungle or the North Pole, that your customers are beginning to think that a satellite phone is necessary, is a necessary tool if you have to have communications capability.
Absolutely. It should be part of your emergency preparedness kit, just like a flashlight is. A generator, or it should be part of your plan. Whether you are a corporation, for your business continuity, or you're an individual, so that you can call the rest of your family in other parts of the country and tell them you're okay. A sat phone today at the really affordable prices that you see is a part that you cannot not have as part of your emergency preparedness kit.
And how competitive, for example, is Inmarsat in mobile-to-mobile calling? Are they like Iridium, where it's about half price, only one party pays for the call, and it's like half the price of a sat phone to public switch network call?
They're pretty close to that. At first they weren't, because the network is designed differently.
Right.
But Inmarsat recognized that they needed to be competitive, and so they've made changes so that now the satellite to satellite calls are a lot less expensive than they used to be, and a lot more competitive with Iridium. They're not quite at the level of Iridium, but they're getting pretty close.
But of course, with the Iridium, you can leave the handset, the antenna retracted, and the phone will work, where you are prohibited from doing that on Inmarsat.
You do need to have the antenna deployed at this point, yes. And that's simply, you know, as we discussed earlier, these are the laws of physics that we can bend somewhat, but not too much. And the Inmarsat satellites is 22 to 23,000 miles up, and the Iridium is only about 500 to 600 miles up. So
it's just a few dBs.
Exactly.
Sir, have I missed anything that you think is relevant?
No, I think that we've discussed this, you know, and covered a lot of these areas. I think that, you know, in the choice of a sat phone, once again, to wrap up, is what is your application? Where are you going to operate? And then in the choice of which satellite phone provider would you like to have, well, I think that, you know, as you mentioned, 24 hours a day service, having things in stock so that you know that when you order, even as a corporation, a hurricane is coming and I need 20 phones immediately, if for some reason you were not prepared, well, we have them. So in picking the right provider, that's the provider that can support you before the sale, to understand what is your need, and really what is the best phone for you, and during the sale to be able to deliver on time, overnight, hundreds of phones, which we do, and then even more importantly, after the sale, to ensure that you can actually get everything that you expect from your sat phone.
Yes, sir. Eric, thank you very much
for
this interview today.